Alpha Day, Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, Housing is now reconvening from recess. We had recess on this bill on February 17, and today is Tuesday, March 15. The time now is 10 o'clock. Welcome to everyone connected by Zoom and those tuning in via television or the YouTube channel. Thank you for your patience for accommodating the Zoom platform while we maintain social distancing mandates. Note for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators, all main media broadcasting outlets on Friday, March 4th, and again on Thursday, March 10th. Today is March 15 and it's 10 o'clock. The agenda this morning would be on the continuation of or the reconvening of Bill 220-36 LS introduced by Senator Amanda Shelton, co-sponsored by Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña Barnes and Senator Jim Moylan, an act to add a new section 26217 to Article 2 of Chapter 26, Title 11, and to add a new subsection to Section 13.101 of Article 13.1 of Chapter 1, Title 5, all of Guam Code Annotated, relative to funding the compensation of adjudicated claims of the greatest generation of Guam for the atrocities suffered during the World War II occupation of Guam. General rules of conduct. This Zoom meeting is hosted by my staff and will mute all Zoom participants until called upon. Members of the committee and or non-committee members will be allowed to pose questions to an individual testifying. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by myself before speaking and begin by stating their name for record-keeping purposes. When called to speak, please ensure that you are unmuted. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the virtual public hearing. Reminder, if there's any violation of this conduct, we will first mute you and then you're removed. Fair warning. Please ensure your video remains on throughout the hearing. Participants must be visible at all times, not engage in any activity during their hearing. If you're having a drink or having a snack, we won't take any blame on you for that. It's too early in the morning. Failure to maintain visibility may cause your removal from the meeting live stream. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that are here today. We have the author of the bill, Senator Amanda Shelton. We have the co-sponsor, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña Barnes. We also have Senator Chris Reynolds, the minority leader. We have Senator Tony Ada, and we have Senator Untitled. We also have President that will be testifying on the bill is Mr. Kennedy Unguero, and we have Department of Revenue and Tax representative, the director, Daphne Shimizu. And if I'm correct, I think was additional agency representatives should be present, such as Mr. Byrne and other folks. Once they come on, then we would have them link up real quick. But as of today, there's only one person that's going to testify so far, and that's Mr. Unguero. And we have Daphne Shimizu who will answer questions that my colleagues may have. But other than that, we only have one individual that will testify, and then unless Ms. Shimizu has anything to say to testify for, she'll be open for any questions that my colleagues may have. And with that, Senator Amanda Shelton, would you like to still give another opening, maybe a shorter version from what you gave earlier last month, ma'am?
Yes, Masi, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity. Half a day to everyone who's here. Thank you very much for hearing the bill again in this second hearing so that we could afford the opportunity to some other folks who wanted to be here to testify on the measure. And for those viewing at home, for the public, I'll briefly explain what Bill 220 does, and that is offer a method to pay every Guam World War II claimant, regardless of the date of death, and who has yet to be awarded a war claim. And while no amount of money can bring back our loved ones or erase the suffering that our people have endured, Bill 220 marks an opportunity to bring closure and justice to all the descendants of our greatest generation. So what it does is seeks to pay these war claims in two ways, and that is creating a tax credit program to allow businesses to pay war claims directly to claimants and later to avail of tax credits to be issued against unpledged business privilege taxes, and a second source of funding, and that is $75 million through Section 30 appropriations. And both of these sources of funding will happen over a 5-year period of time. The tax credit program will allow businesses to pay the claimants directly and to receive a dollar-for-dollar match for tax credit from the government of Guam. And this will allow swift issuing of payments to claimants who have not already received a war claim. And I want to thank the folks who are here today. I see Mr. Byrne, Ms. Shimizu from our government agencies who are affected by this bill, who will be part of the measure. And so I thank you for being here today to testify, as well as Mr. Leon Guerrero. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Shelton. Now I ask Mr. Leon Guerrero, and as Senator Shelton mentioned, Mr. Byrne has also joined us today. Mr. Leon Guerrero, you're the only one scheduled to testify today. So please go ahead and begin with your testimony, sir.
Okay, to begin with, I believe this bill is very financially irresponsible. And what it does, it takes taxes contributed to the government of Guam from all of us and redistributes it to a very small subset of our population. There's no denying that there should be some compensation for the victims. I don't disagree with that at all. However, our politicians wasted time and decades, literally, getting to this point. If we were going to pay this out of our own money, out of Guam tax revenues, we should have done it back in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, or even the early 2000s, when more of the peak claimants were still alive. We had an opportunity to have the federal government pay it, but our representative at the time blew that opportunity because, well, basically she got greedy. So what we're looking at now is we're trying to, in a political election year, and this is the way it comes across to me, is to buy the votes of the public with this bill. Because technically I'm a beneficiary of this bill, but I didn't suffer. My generation born did not suffer, yet we're going to be the direct claimants of this money. And when I say that, I mean my grandfather's generation, they suffered. My parents' generation, they suffered. My generation did not suffer. Yet why should my generation be the beneficiaries of the bill? Because the way this bill is written, you know, payments to be paid regardless of the date of death. So we're taking these revenues and putting them in the estates of everybody who was alive in 1945. And, you know, we're talking, I don't think it's $150 million. By the time the claims are all put in, we're going to be closer to $250 to $300 million by the time you look at all the generations. Because just in my generation alone, we're looking at 39, 40 potential beneficiaries of my father's generation, and maybe even more that I'm not aware of. And the way this bill is written, you know, that by paying after death, we're basically saying that anybody who died that was alive in 1945, anybody who's alive, all their descendants are eligible for compensation under this bill. I don't think that was the original intent of the bill. I think the original intent of the entire process was to benefit those who suffered during World War II, not the descendants of those who did not suffer under World War II. But passage of this bill will inflict suffering on my generation and subsequent generations, because contrary to popular belief, at least in the administration and maybe in this legislature, the federal government is not going to carpet bomb us with billions of dollars ad nauseum and to infinity. At some point in time, the largesse of the federal government is going to come to an end, and government of Guam is going to have to survive on our own tax revenues. already we have a substantial claim on the Section 30 money through the solid waste bonds. I think it's somewhere around 25 or 30 million a year. So that's nearly half of the Section 30 money gone right there. And I think there's a couple of other pledges on Section 30 money, but I haven't had time to do a deep dive into that. But in the meantime, government of Guam's revenue base has been eviscerated. All you have to do is drive through Tamuning and Harmon and look at all the vacant buildings. Walk through the malls and look. I mean, I never thought I'd see a day there would be maybe 30, 40, 50% vacancy in Micronesian Mall, or again, your shopping center, or even Gibson's. But you walk through the store, through the malls, you will see a large number of vacancies. We hear industry experts in tourism say that the tourism industry is not going to recover until maybe 2025 to 2030. And this Ukraine situation has probably thrown those numbers off again as well. So we don't have the economy that we had in 2019. And even in 2019, as I recall listening to the special economic session, we were going down the toilet with, I think, 80% of the special funds not hitting forecast. I mean, this administration is probably very thankful COVID hit because of the billions of dollars that came in on federal funds. But this bill is going to create a 30 to 40, maybe even a $50 million donut hole in government of Guam finances. And I don't see any place in this bill that offsets government operations to make the difference. Because, I mean, if we have businesses getting tax credits on a one-for-one basis for direct payments, that's going to create a donut hole for Department of Revenue and Tax. Where are they going to get the money to make up the budgets that you guys are passing? I mean, you're passing billion-dollar budgets that don't make any sense in the real world. And yet now you want to turn around and gut the revenue streams by taking Section 30 money and taking direct cash payments to government of Guam out of the revenue stream and awarding it to people that is nothing more than a political payoff. Now, I could justify this type of a bill if it went to doing something that benefited all the people of Guam. For example, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in 2017 or 2018 said it would take $140 million to modernize the entire school system, bringing every building up to 21st century standards and technology. I could get behind that because children are our largest export here on Guam. And they're competing out there in a world where against students who are coming from stronger school systems with better education. And, so I could see spending that money to improve our education system for the benefit of the children. Because eventually those children will come back to Guam, we hope, like I did. I'm a beneficiary of a Guam public education. I spent almost 30 years in the mainland, but I came back. Hopefully, if we do a good job with those children, they'll come back. For years and years and years, this legislature, previous legislatures, previous administrations have all talked about fixing GMH, and none of that has happened. I would be in favor if we took that money and did some repairs to Guam Memorial Hospital, like right now we're looking at the fact that the first time I testified on Guam Memorial, I think it was 2012. And at that time, it's going to be $3.5 to $5 million to bring the labor and delivery up to state of the art. Well, here we are 10 years later. That hasn't been done. And we've had 30,000 children born in those antiquated facilities. We hear that it's going to cost somewhere around $10 million to upgrade the power panel. That's been kicking around since 2016. And at that time, it was only $4 million. The elevators, we're looking at $1 million just to bring the elevators up. But we spent $1 million on that emergency room tent that the security guard uses as a smoking room and a break room out there in the parking lot. So if we're going to spend $150 million, we need to spend 150 million tax dollars from Guam residents to benefit all Guam residents. And this bill is much like the $300 gas card. All it does is provide me with 4 tanks of gas, whereas a $20 million expenditure could have created a mass transit system for Guam that would have been equal to the mass transit system in Hawaii. And that $20 million expenditure would benefit all the residents of Guam, saving people as much as $30 a day in the operating cost of a privately owned vehicle. So if we're going to use tax dollars, we need to use them in such a way that they benefit all the residents of Guam, not just a very small subset of residents of Guam, because the pain of this bill is going to be felt by all the residents of Guam as government departments and agencies start getting their budgets cut and are forced to cut services and lay off people as a result of the diversion of revenues from Department of Revenue and Taxation and their ability to meet the budgets that you guys are laying on the doorstep in front of them. I just think it's a total waste. I mean, if we look at how we could do this better, I think that we need to really sit down and look at what is the wisest use of $150,000. I mean, right now we're paying $15 million rent. Whereas if we took $150 million and built the Department of Administration building and related facilities, that would be paid off in 10 years if we did that. But if we take $150 million, it's going to go to people who are, many of them who are living in the mainland. We're not going to get the tax spin on that. And most of that money is going to go to off-island purchases, so we won't even get any grocery or business privilege taxes off most of that spend to help offset the cost. So in my opinion, if we were going to pursue this, we should have our delegate continue to pursue an effort to try to get the federal government to pay it like they should have, like they offered to at one time before our delegate got greedy. And in the meantime, I am not in favor of this bill. This bill is not in the best interest of the people of Guam.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much. We also have Ms. Romana Paris, better known as Cherry. Ms. Paris, if we can get your computer to unmute, and then we will, there you go, Ms. Paris.
I'm sorry, Mr. Agustin, Dr. Senator.
Está Mauli.
Stop. Senior Simon, come on.
Are they, was he talking to me?
Yes, it's your turn.
Senator? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm only here to support the idea of paying every person that was involved in the Manangun camp, you know. And but as far as funding the bill, I am not. I don't know what to say because then I am not familiar. I have not checked into the mechanism of how to fund this bill if it should be passed. But I am all for in favor of having everybody during the Japanese occupation, you know, especially going over to the Manangun, to get something, because we were all there. It's not just a few that can write and you know can testify and whatnot to be paid. It should be everybody that was in the concentration camp should get something. That's, like I said, I'm not prepared. I'm sorry. It's the last minute thing that I decided to come over and support the senator's bill. I mean, for the public hearing. But I have not done any research as far as like what Ken Nyingred was saying or the administration. But I'll be more than happy to do a research and see, as far as funding is concerned. But Senator Shelton, I am in support of having everybody benefit, financially that were in that concentration camp. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate it. Your testimony. Okay, thank you. I'd like to also recognize that Senator Brown has joined us. I've got the message that the two representatives of the two different agencies, Department of Administration, Mr. Byrne, and Ms. Daphne Shinzo from DRT, where I was going to also testify in reference to the bill. I will begin with Daphne. We'll start with you. Okay, and then you'll be followed by Mr. Byrne.
Half a day, and thank you so much, Chairman Agustin, and good morning to you. Good morning to Vice Speaker Muña Barnes, Senator Shelton, Senator Dueñas, Senator Addis, Senator Tadegui, Senator Brown, and other members of the 36th Guam Legislature, and also to the members of the public who may be present who are watching at home online and from who are watching online. Although I don't have anything any written testimony prepared, I did have the opportunity to meet with my team to discuss this particular bill, Bill 220-36. And I want to thank you for the opportunity for me to be able to speak on this matter. With regards to the bill, our team did have a few comments. One that with regards to how the credit would work, the tax credit, from our perspective, from the tax administration, it was not clear how the mechanics, what the mechanics of this are. That is how the credit would actually work and how businesses would avail of it. Also, whether it's applicable to sole proprietors, corporations, etc. Also, it was not clear how this bill, if enacted, would impact the 3% that's pledged for bond covenants of BPT. Is the $75 million in excess of the 3% that's already pledged? And again, that was just a comment and something that our team had come up with. And the last comment that we had to do with the transferability provision, and with regards to transferability of the credit. I guess, in particular, because this is for payment of war claims, one of the concerns that our team had brought up is, of course, if there is transferability, if credit is paid or is if the credit is purchased, the same characteristics of non-taxability may not apply as if you were paid directly, if you were the war claim survivor yourself. And so that is the other point that we had brought up, again, as we discussed that. And so I think ultimately, really, again, just the details of how the tax credit would work, it's not clear. And, of course, if the legislative body would be able to share that information, or if they had kind of the details of that or examples, then that would be very helpful to our team. And again, those are our comments, and I thank you again, and I will be available for questions, at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne. Mr. Byrne, with the Department of Administration, do you have anything you'd like to testify in reference to this bill before you're open for questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I do have a few comments that I would like to make. Again, it's not a written testimony, but it's my feeling on the whole issue that we're trying to address here. War is destructive. Wars end, but the effects of wars linger. I'm old enough to remember those who served and survived the First World War, and talking to them, many of these what you would call veterans suffered terribly throughout their lives as a result of what they had to deal with in the First World War. And indeed, obviously, I remember those who served in the Second World War, including my father and most of my teachers at the time, including one who served the whole of the war in Changi because he happened to be in Singapore when the Japanese moved in. So no one doubts that war victims deserve to be looked after and compensated for the injuries which they suffered. Guam suffered particularly because it was invaded and actually had to, I guess, really, the effects of what elsewhere would be called concentration camps were inflicted upon these victims. And although I grew up in a city scarred by the Second World War, it was nothing to the scars that got left on these victims. I would like to update, if I may, senators, with where we are with the actual payment out of war claims under the previously enacted legislation. Senators may well know that the Adjudication Committee met for the first time, agreed the rules, and published the dates for the applications to be submitted to the committee. And they're going to open on April the 1st. And they will go through March the 3rd next year. We will be ready on April the 1st to receive those claims. And I know the committee will give every consideration to the claims that are put before them. We don't know how many are going to come in. We're just estimating, I think there was an estimate from BMR that it was something over 700 that were expected to be submitted. But the committee is ready to receive these when the application window opens. DOA had the same questions about the tax credits. Normally, tax credits are offered when the recipient of the tax credit makes a payment or accepts an obligation. But it isn't clear in the wording here what actually is intended. GASB requires, and it's in our audited statements, that we disclose the amount of tax credits that are issued during the year or used during the year. And is also looking at further disclosures which will apply in future years' financial statements. But whichever way you look at it, they are a reduction in revenues because they're a credit. And that is indeed what I think GASB is looking at. The section that deals with the deposit into a war claims fund, it appears to come from the amount that is received from Section 30 funding, which, as you know, is generally received in September of each year. This seems to be, and again, this is a question that I think needs clarification, because I don't know what the intent of the words after fiscal year 2014 means. For fiscal 22, we received 76 million, but that 76 million was included in our budget revenues. So if you segregate and put 15 million in a separate special fund from the Section 30 capture, again, that will reduce the revenues that are available to be appropriated for the budget. The third section, the third question, senators, that we had was in the Tier 3 claimants. It's not clear to me what this means. Claimants aren't really defined. So perhaps we could better understand what that particular subsection regarding claimants, regardless of the date of death, adjudicated by the Adjudication Committee, exactly means. Every wrong must be put right. We're trying to put right the omissions of 75 years in 2 years. And that's a tall order. What we certainly must be careful of is completely upturning or disrupting the budgetary process for the government of Guam, which in fiscal 23 and fiscal 24 will have to transition back to local revenues, or dependent on local revenues. And we want to obviously maintain the level of service that the people of Guam have come to expect and deserve. So to take out a large part of that budget before the budget discussion has been actually even started, and we're going to start on that and conclude it in August, seems to be something that we should consider and maybe revisit after the budget, but to visit it before the budget seems to be premature. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Ed, anything else, Ed, you'd like to bring up? Nothing else? You're good, Ed?
Yes,
That was it? All right, thank you very much, Ed. Now we'll open up for questions by my colleagues. I'll begin first with the author of the bill, unless she wants to save it for last. But Madam Senator Shelton, would you like to be you'll follow everybody?
Yes, thank
All right.
you.
Okay, Madam Vice Speaker, you're first, please.
Zeus Masi, Mr. Chairman, ANNOTATED, to everyone here. And I want to thank Mrs. Paris. Terry, thank you so very much for continuing to support those who suffered the atrocities and also survived the atrocities of World War II. You being here gives a clear representation of the policymakers here in the 36th Guam legislature not giving up on the greatest generation that ever lived. I want to note for the record, Mr. Chair, that if we're looking at the numbers to date, based on the actual numbers and what may be spent at its fullest potential, I know that after World War II, there was at least 14,721 survivors and 1,170 civilian deaths recorded by the National Park Service. Those numbers are important because I want to add, as of today, based on public law, U.S. Public Law 114-328, the Compensable Guam Victims Act, and the definition that's on there, there are over 2,459 of the 3,760 claims that have been adjudicated already. So the period that we're opening for, so the max we can get for survivors, those that survived and suffered the atrocities of World War II, was 15,891. And I can give you those numbers, Mr. Chair, in writing, because if we look at the possibilities of even bringing up those that did not sign, that did not sign during the federal government's timeline, then we were probably looking at another 700 cases. But mind you, I was thinking that everything here would cost a little bit over 115 million. I could be wrong. I'm not a mathematician, but based on if every single person who survived and the heirs of those who died, the number would be at 15,891. I know this to be true is because we worked with the nonprofit organizations, the Menengan Memorial, and of course, Senator Frank Bloss's nonprofit organization that we did the memorial walls for the survivors of World War II. So I continue to support the efforts so that we can literally close the chapter, Mr. Chair. I provide the numbers as we see to date, and hoping that if this is an alternative that can work for our community, that we truly give that vigilant effort of giving our greatest generation what was rightfully deserving of them. And every day we see a loved one who survived or were to leave us, and they should at least be compensated. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So maybe the impact, I should ask, Mr. Chair, before I close is maybe ask Ms. Daphne or Mr. Byrne, the claims to date. I know Mr. Byrne said 700, but based on the adjudication process through the federal government, have they received any final numbers to verify the number count I have? Have they personally, as the government of Guam, received the information on the actual payouts?
Yes, actually, over the weekend, Vice Speaker, I did receive some information. I haven't passed it all yet, but I can certainly provide that information in summary to the committee.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, if I can note for the record, the federal government's laws, those were alive until December 23rd, 2016. Those survivors after that could be able to apply. And then those who were alive during or suffered during December 8th, 1941 to July 21st, 1944. And the descendants that can apply for those who suffered and died through that period. So I'm just giving the realistic numbers, sir, and maybe we can get that so that we can really look at the amount that may truly be needed to close this chapter and make sure that the greatest generation that has suffered and the atrocities and have died, that they get what's rightfully their heirs. So I will go ahead and provide those numbers in writing to you, Mr. Chair, and make sure that those dates are intact so the community, that's the residents that are still alive, that they know how they can apply. Sana Masi.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Speaker. Appreciate that. We're going to need all the information we can get. Senator Chris Duenas, sir, you're next, sir.
Tidus Masi, Mr. Chairman, and I think, as has been demonstrated by the recent passage of legislation to ensure that the window has been maintained open for those who are eligible under the original program, our commitment to this effort is stated based on how we've conducted ourselves. My concern at this point, and I really only have one question now that for the continuation of this hearing, that we have Director Byrne as well as Director Shimizu. I really just have one question for both of them because I think this is what is fundamental. Even if we decided that this was the path to go down, in the presentation of the bill and the funding sources that are being called for, I want to start with Director Shimizu. It sounded to me as though the assertion of the impact as well as the just the general mechanics cannot be determined at this time. Was that an accurate summation of your testimony?
Yes, Senator, it's not clear how it will work. And to go to, I think, a point that Director Byrne was making earlier, generally what will happen is, how it would work is if I am perhaps somebody who I'm going to be able to avail of this benefit only if I am going to actually have to pay BPT. And so if I don't owe BPT, then I don't have a claim, and I don't have a claim. You have to meet those two criteria. You have to owe BPT and you have to have a claim. And so again, the mechanics of how it would work is really not clear. And so the answer that I have to your question is yes, at this point, the mechanics are not clear. And so that's something that really needs to be clarified, at least for tax administration, so we make sure that if enacted, we understand how this would work and we know how to execute it properly.
Thank you, Director Shimizu. And Director Byrne, I'm extrapolating from your testimony that the impact or potential impact is not ascertainable also at this time, and could not be factored into a proper budgetary process as we move into the budget season and we'll be convening and discussing that issue in August. Would that be a correct summation of your testimony?
Certainly. Thank you, Senator. And as I say, almost every time I appear before you senators, it's a matter of priorities. The legislature is the body that sets the priorities. Yes, at this moment, we don't know how many people are going to apply for the existing program. I hope, everybody, we're putting out information and putting out advertisements and trying to disseminate this program as far and fast as we can. But I hope everybody who is entitled to will apply under that program, and that we can pay out these compensation amounts as quickly as possible. But at this moment, yes, I really don't. I have no grasp because we don't know where exactly we stand with this program, or this current program that we have, or this contemplated program.
Yeah, Mr. Byrne, I appreciate your recognition that the legislature sets the priorities, but let's be clear, we're in a political environment here whereby this type of legislation we have to answer for in terms of balancing the priorities and also the priority of the administration. It is the executive branch that issues us the first draft of the budget request as per the needs of the government of Guam. It is then our duty to hold hearings and to ensure that your numbers are accurate and correct and could fund the agencies and the expectations of the people of Guam on service delivery. And then there's a final debate prior to the passage in terms of reconciling those numbers. I'd like to remind Mr. Leon Guerrero that this legislature has been extremely frugal and has done a great job, I believe. That's demonstrated by the $50+ million that continues to be in surplus to our very conservative budgets. Is it conservative enough for everybody? Probably not. But we certainly have been on the mark with our numbers in terms of being responsible for the resources of the people of Guam. But Mr. Byrne, I just want to say one more time, I appreciate that we would set the priority. But my question was more in line with, as our priority collectively, could this, if this money were spoken for, would it have an impact in terms of the service delivery that's been represented by your budget submission as of late, and as the debate goes forward on the budget for the coming up fiscal year?
Well, Senator, yes, the executive budget has been submitted to the legislature, and the executive budget did not include this expenditure. Therefore, if this expenditure, and as you rightly say, we don't really know in the range where this is going to be, but if this expenditure were contemplated, there would have to be a budgetary adjustment. And that is, as you rightly say, a matter that has to be resolved between the executive and the legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Mr. Chairman, I think that, at least answers my questions on the fiscal portion of this proposal. Certainly, I think we're going to be grappling with this for years and to come in terms of trying to arrive at a solution. But at this point, I think it's clear to me, at least, that the financial mechanism is not durable at this point. So just Masi, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Senator Tony Ada, sir. You have
Thank you,
any
Mr. Chair.
questions?
Just like to thank everyone for coming in to testify on this bill. My question was asked by my colleague, so I don't have any questions of Ms. Shimizu or Mr. Byrne. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll continue to listen on.
Thank you, sir. Senator Tello, do you have any questions you'd like to pose to the members that are present?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I'd like to thank Mr. Leon Guerrero for being here today, as well as Mrs. Paris. Thank you so much for providing your testimony. And Ken, I hear what you have to say about this. It makes a lot of sense. I wish this was not an election year for this bill to be going through. I think this bill was kind of rushed, without Reverend Tax coming here saying a lot of things are not clear. I mean, even I have a lot of questions with regards to what's not clear here. And one of them, if I may, sorry, my thing is not working here. Okay, there we go. If I may, is regarding the bill. So I think I will bring this to Mr. Byrne. You might know funding more so with regards to this dealing with tax credit as well as Section 30 money. If you look at the bill, Mr. Byrne, did you notice that there is an overlapping for FY 2026, October 1st, 2025 to September 30th, 2026, $15 million. And this is, if I'm not mistaken, it's Section 30 money. If I'm not mistaken, and Daphne, correct me too if I'm wrong, that from January, tax credits are basically on a calendar year versus Section 30 is on a fiscal year. First, let me ask that question. Is that correct to Mr. Burns or Daphne? Is tax credits accumulated on a calendar year?
Well, might I say, so there are different types of tax credits. So there are tax credits for BPT, there's tax credits for real property, there are different credits. So but the way the BPT is reported is based on a tax year, starting with January through December, yes.
Okay,
Senator
that's right. Okay, thank you. And then on Section 30, isn't that accumulated based on fiscal year, Mr. Byrne? On a fiscal year?
Yes, Senator.
Okay.
We received it in September for the ensuing financial year.
Right. Okay, so if you notice in one section of the bill on FY 2026, you'll see there's an overlapping there. I mean, it's first you're looking at the first year at 15 million, second year at 15 million, and then you're going further down at a total of 30 million every year after that, 3, 4, and 5, fifth year. So there is some overlapping, and that's just my concern too, because not only that, and Daphne, you hit it on the nail when you said it's unclear, because even I have questions with regards to this particular part when it comes to proposed tax credits applying to only BPT taxes and is assigned and negotiated by claimants. If the tax credits are negotiable, would it be responsible that tax credits be applied to other taxes such as property taxes, further negotiable to pay car registration, license fee, penalties, administrative by DRT, all that administrated by DRT. Bill 22 claims that tax credits are fully negotiable. Can the tax credits be reassigned and retransferred once claimant has transferred them? BBT is a tax. What is the legality of a claimant to sell the tax credits below cost, to pay BPT taxes at cost? Is this legal? Can this be a form of tax evasion? I mean, there's so many questions. And I think the bill was just rushed for whatever reason. And maybe, Ken, you're right. Maybe it was rushed for political reasons. I'm not sure, but I think this is so important that we should not rush a bill like this through, considering what it may happen to our general fund in the future on paying other things that are very important to our community. But don't get me wrong, I was in support of the speaker when she incorporated a section in the bill that didn't make it on the floor to allow everyone who is their descendants of those who died during the war, and if they weren't alive, those descendants should avail themselves. So but this bill, I think it's just not the right time. We're first taking care of those who missed the deadline. It's $10 million right now that's been incorporated in any kind of excess funds that this legislature has the authority and the responsibility to appropriate. But then you're looking at next year, we're not going to have this much money from the federal government, and we've got to do this cautiously. So that's a concern. And I think maybe, Mr. Chair, and as well as the sponsor of the legislation, that we should have a sit down and create a task force to look at something like this, to move forward on this, and incorporate the committee that's right now adjudicating other, that's been in place to adjudicate what we just passed recently on those who missed the deadline. I mean, that's more responsible. I'd hate to use this as a political ploy, at all. But and justifiably, there's a lot of questions, especially on DRT side, that needs to be changed around. It will almost change the bill, Mr. Chair, to try and answer all the uncertainty that's in this legislation. So appreciate the opportunity again. And for Mr. Burns and Daphne, thank you so much for being here as well. That being said, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to make comments and ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Senator Brown, do you have any questions to the panel or any comments on the bill? Ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly thank you for the opportunity once again to hold a hearing and continuing a hearing with regards to this bill. My position really has not changed, Mr. Chair. I think we all, those of us that are descendants to the degree that we can, empathize and understand what for some our parents, our grandparents went through the war, what a horrific time and what tremendous challenges our people have gone through. And I know for each of us personally, I was 18 when my grandfather passed away. So at least for the first 18 years of my life, he was very much an influence in me and probably has a lot to do with my affinity and care for my island and even the work that I do now. And to what degree he would talk about his war experience, which was not pleasant. I mean, he was a grown adult. He was in his early 40s. He had children. He had a home in Aganya and a life. To have all that taken away and literally have to start from nothing, and the suffering that he and many others of our people, my grandmother, who only lived a few years after the war before she passed away from illness, they had a very hard life going through this. And I think the more we learn as our life has gone on about what our people experience, it's heartbreaking and it's tremendously tragic. And here we are all these years later trying to find some kind of way. How do we ease that suffering and pain that our people went through? I don't know if that's possible. And I don't believe that this bill is a vehicle to do it. The fact that we're expecting our people, and this is, as I mentioned, Mr. Chair, and I will continue to repeat it as our colleagues want to continue to move this idea and this issue forward, that somehow we in the Guam legislature are in a position to absolve the hurt and the pain our people have suffered through the payment of money that is expected to come from our people. Logically, it makes no sense to me. Morally, I'm totally at a loss at how we believe in any way, shape, or form that this is somehow going to resolve the challenges and the issues that our people and the suffering that our people went through during the war. I cannot even figure that in my mind, how that is even possible. What is bothersome to me, and yes, maybe it is the election year and whatever's in the air in the election year, this idea that somehow we are in a position to pay this out, and yet the proposal is for through legislation, is for our people to pay themselves. Those of us that are descendants of those that have since passed away, and yes, many, many, many of our people that suffered, so many of them, the majority of them have since passed away. We have an expectation that somehow we're going to make their children, grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren that are alive now in this community, that are going through all the challenges that are currently happening in this community, to pay themselves for a circumstance and a situation of war that was brought upon them from external forces. I've been in the legislature a long time. I think only second to Senator Tina. She's only a couple terms ahead of me, but I've had a 14-year absence. I cannot, in my mind, even begin to rationalize. And I have, like Senator Frank Blas, worked with many of our survivors of the war. As I've mentioned before, one of my early tasks coming back to Guam, working for Governor Atta, was working with the Guam War Reparations Commission. At the time, Congressman Ben Blas had HR 2024 before Congress to address the compensation to our people. This was back in 1989. And one of my early tasks was to serve as executive director. I was appointed by Governor Ada to serve as executive director of the Guam War Reparations Commission to do exactly, to identify as many of our war survivors at the time, which is far more than what we have now, obviously, to be able to apply and be readily available that once and hope with the hope that this legislation would pass so that they could be compensated for the issues and the challenges and the suffering that they experienced. Unfortunately, because of disagreements locally and the amounts of compensation for the different categories, the bill didn't pass. But we had extensive public hearings on Guam. The commission traveled to California. And then the commission members, public members were Beatrice Emsley. Many of us know the story and the suffering that Beatrice Emsley went through at being almost beheaded as a young girl. To Pete Cruz, who was a defender, an insular guard at the plaza. The former and late Mayor Bernardo of Jotnia. To staff them, to help them write their testimony, to sit with them in the halls of Congress while they provided their testimony. That certainly by the time that hearing was over, there was not a dry eye in the house, as they say. They traveled so far. At their age, they were already getting up in the years. This was back in 1989. And Pete Cruz, who all the way till 1 o'clock in the morning, still wanted to edit his presentation. And I had to really think, wow, he's come so far and waited so long to tell the members of Congress what he went through, what his family went through, what his people went through in their suffering. And he wanted to get it right. So I had to understand that at 1 o'clock in the morning to sit with him and modify probably for the 8th or 9th time his testimony. And then I had to realize he came so far and waited so long. He could write whatever he wanted and change it as many times as he wanted, and we would be there to do it for him. So my colleagues and all the things that we do in the Guam legislature, I have to tell you, this is the one bill that troubles me the absolute most. We want to pay out money to go to the descendants because, of course, we don't want to think that our loved ones that have since died are forgotten. We don't want to think they got, left behind. But to ask our people, to ask the descendants of those that suffered during the war to pay themselves what we are saying is reparations. I had one colleague say, oh, no, it's not reparations. Then what are we doing? Especially now, Senator Tello had mentioned it's at this time when we continue, and I don't know if there's ever going to be time. I don't think there's ever in my mind, I cannot intellectualize that there's ever going to be a time that the people of Guam should pay themselves for reparations out of their own pocket. If we think that detouring this through the business community and saying, oh, it's coming from the business sector can get tax credits to do this. We all know the people of Guam all know where the money's coming from. The business people aren't just making the money on their own. Where are they making the money? They're making it from the goods and services they provide to the members of our community, to our people, the people that put us here. And now, when we're dealing with the challenges of a future that we don't know, it's undefined where we are going, where our economy is going to be in the next few months as the federal funds continue to dwindle. Tumon continues to be shuttered, closed. We know we cannot survive. We can talk all we want to about the revenue streaming in and brag about that, and aren't we doing great? But we know deep down, we know that money's drying up. And we have been subsidized by Uncle Sam this last 2 years to get us through this pandemic. And I'm right there. I appreciate it. Thank you, Uncle Sam. But we cannot survive on our own economic engine. And during this time when our people are challenged now to afford groceries, to afford gas, and people, we've seen the prices in the stores. They're not raising it by a few cents here or there. They're raising it by dollars. And what are people doing? They're sacrificing even more. They're cutting down on what they need for their family so that they can get by. And then on top of that, we're going to pretend to tell them that if we pass this legislation, we're going to be able to find a funding source to pay them for the loss and the suffering of their loved one that has since passed since World War II. So, Mr. Chair, I cannot in my mind fathom legislation like this, because this to me is taking money from our people out of their pockets for something they are not responsible for. Our people are not morally responsible for reparations. This to me is just about giving money so we can say, look what we did for you, my dear people of Guam. And I just don't understand that. I think we have to have some moral fiber to do what is right. This is not right. This to me is pretending that we're saving our people. This doesn't acknowledge my grandparents any more than anything else did. They do that. They did that on their own through their own struggle and their survival from the war, including those of our family that didn't make it. But this to use this as a vehicle and to say, oh, we are resolving the reparations issue. Do you think that those members of that commission are public members that went all the way to Washington, D.C. to testify? Do you think if they were alive today and we asked them to impeach Mrs. Emsley, would you support this legislation for our people to pay our own people reparations? I have to tell you that never came up in all the many days and hours I spent with them. The thought that the people of Guam would pay their own reparations. If it's from Uncle Sam, I will be right there. I will be right there with you. But this, there's never going to be a right time for this type of legislation to pass, my dear people. And if you think our people out there don't know, they're naive, they don't care as long as they get the money, we have to have some moral fiber to do what is right. And Mr. Chair, this legislation still, I don't care how many hearings you hold on this legislation, there's no way in the world we can justify to our people that we should have them pay their reparations. This, I hope, is, our people don't ever go through this again. But now that I see what's happening in the world right now, I don't know. I hope not. I hope it doesn't come knocking on our door. But we cannot resolve this long-standing issue and the inequity and the suffering of our people by expecting our people to pay for this, be it through the business community and business credits or whatever other configuration members of the legislature may want to come up with. There's nothing that can ever justify our people paying themselves. That's not reparations, Mr. Speaker, and this does not honor our family members that suffered, and this does not honor our family members that have died during the war or have since passed away. So with that, Mr. Chair, I have no further comments with regards to this bill, and thank you for the opportunity to provide my comments with regards to it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Brown. I'm looking and I don't see any other colleague. The author of the bill is Senator Shelton. Do you have any comments or closing? And then I will adjourn this hearing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel who was here today to testify. I want to thank especially Auntie Terry for being here to support the bill, and to Mr. Byrne and Ms. Shimizu for your comments on the bill and your questions. I think we have some work to do, and I'll work with the chairman to address some of these questions and concerns that you brought up for us today. And I want to especially thank the war survivors and their families who asked us during a period last year while we were addressing other war claims legislation here in the body, to continue to pursue this type of bill to address every war survivor and pay out a claim to every war survivor and their family members, so that they are not forgotten. And that is how this bill came about last year, before an election year, during a time where war claims and the discussions on war claims was at its peak. And as you, my colleagues know, and Mr. Chair, sometimes the legislative process is a little bit slow, and we're here today. It happens to be an election year for a bill that was introduced before an election year. And I'm thankful to you for hearing it today and for helping us to bring about these discussion points that will help us to strengthen the bill and to make it something that we can all work with and make a very clear and definitive instructions for our agencies to follow to help us carry out these mandates. And, to address some points on the financial responsibility of the bill, that is why this bill was written the way it was, to be paid out over a 5-year period, not to immediately ambush the government of Guam's revenues, but to space it out over time and to allow for businesses to avail of a tax credit program that will ultimately help us swiftly pay our families who are seeking justice for the war survivors of their family. And to be clear, this is a bill that will provide for the claimant, the war survivor, to only be paid once. So if that war survivor was already paid through the existing program today, they would not be eligible for this program. And not every single member of a family can make a claim and receive a claim for that war survivor. It would be one claim and one payment per war survivor. And I want to thank also the Vice Speaker for bringing up some points, sharing with us some numbers that I know that she will give to the committee on how we came about to the $150 million price tag today. We know that it was several years ago in the US Congress when the World War II Loyalty Recognition Act was being researched and discussed, that a total number of $180 million was brought to us to be able to cover all of the war survivors who were alive during the time of war on Guam. And we know that through the War Claims Program, we've paid out over $30 million now. And so the $150 million that is attached to this bill is, to us, a safe estimate that will help us to pay those who remain. And like Mr. Leon Guerrero, I'm sure there will be other families who do not choose to opt into this program, because ultimately this program that we are setting up, opening it to all those who are war survivors, regardless of their date of death, it is a process that you must opt into, you must apply for and be approved. So there will, I'm sure, be families who will not choose to participate. And Mr. Chair, again, I want to thank you for the discussion today, and I'll work closely with the committee so that we can address any issues that were brought up today, and to continue to work with our colleagues to make this happen for our war survivors and their families who we know continue to seek justice. We can all agree that this is not the ideal way for us to pay for these war claims, to pay these people who suffered so much over time. But this is a path forward for us, and we are happy to explore this and to hopefully bring some sort of closure. We know that no amount of money, no dollar amount can ever bring back our loved ones. No dollar amount can ever right the wrongs that were done to our people. But this is a path forward to us to seek justice. So I thank you very much for your time and everyone here today. Sidious Masi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. And I'd like to thank the folks that participated today, other than my colleagues, Mr. Ken Guerrero, Terry, Ms. Paris, Mr. Byrne, the Director of Department of Administration, and Ms. Daphne Shimzu, the Department of Revenue and Taxation. And with that, the committee will continue to receive testimonies and accept additional information such that was mentioned here today. And submit the testimony to the mailroom of the Guam Legislature or through email at senatorjoesnoxing@gmail.com. And again, I would like to thank everyone for attending this virtual public hearing and providing feedback and suggestions. The public hearing for Bill 220-36 LS is now adjourned. The time now is 11:09 a.m. and today is the 15th. Correction, yeah, the 15th, right? The 15th of March. I'm missing the days. This is virtual. But since those minds, folks, please be safe today. Wear your mask, wash your hands, and keep your distance. And the committee will have the additional hearing this afternoon on the continuation on the the Veterans Administration's office concerned. That's Senator Tello's bill. Thank you. Take care.